Hey guys, what's going on? It's MajiinBae. Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to do something a little different. I wanted to give you guys a quick little tier list. Some people have been asking about it, and it makes for really clickable YouTube content. So here we are. It's a bit of a quick and dirty one. The official tier list making websites wanted me to sign up with my Twitter account, and I didn't want to do that. So we're using Canva, so it might be a little scuffed, but please bear with me. So this tier list is going to be slightly heavier weighted in regards to tournament play than ladder play, because tournament play matters more than ladder play. The tier 1 decks will still be good on ladder, right? But the tier 1.5 decks are going to be a little less strong overall and a little more strong maybe in certain circumstances. I'll do my best to talk about it. Tier 2 decks might be niche picks, things like that, and might suffer on ladder, and they might be really good in a specific tournament lineup, and I'm gonna try to do my best to talk about that as well. But mostly I'm gonna be going just off of raw power. What's the best? What's the most consistent? That kind of thing. If you don't know who I am, welcome to the channel. My name is MajiinBae. I'm seasonal champion, top 16 world finisher. Other things, I'm sure, but that's it. Let's get into it. So tier 0, I have this nice tier here, and we're gonna completely ignore it. There is nothing in tier 0 right now, and you might be saying to yourself, but wait, Mr. MajiinBae, couldn't you have just not made a tier 0 and said there are no tier 0? And yes, you're right, I could have, but I feel like this got the point across better. I feel like having an entire tier here with nothing in it really drove the point home that there is nothing tier 0. No deck is too powerful right now. Things are very much up in the air, and things are going to be moving a lot. So by next week, I expect this tier list to not be invalid, but I expect this to be out of date by next week. Maybe I'll do another one right before the open rounds. Who knows? So anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I'm just gonna go left to right here, and we'll kind of, that's not true. I'm gonna go tier 1 and down. It makes it easier. The tier 1 is going to be sorted by what I believe to be most to least powerful, and then the rest of the tier list is going to be a little bit more wishy-washy. But the number 1 deck right now, in my opinion, is Samira Fizz. And it's not the best performing deck. It's really hard to play. There's a lot of decks that have higher win rates than it, but I think Fizz Samira is the number 1 tier 1 deck. And the reason I have for that is it has a lot of very good matchups. It really rewards higher level of play, and most importantly, the entire format has to warp around Fizz Samira. The decks that you see are winning right now. The decks that you saw winning a few days ago were in direct reaction to Fizz Samira, right? You saw a lot of decks with Caustic Griffin, things like that. A lot of Jarvan Alawi with Cataclysm looking to take advantage of decks with no removal, and that was a direct result of Fizz Samira being incredibly powerful, being the number 1 deck, basically. Now the meta shifted again, and we have decks that are preying on the Caustic Rift decks, right? On the decks that are looking to play small ball removal. And just like that, format warping power is enough to put Fizz Samira currently at tier number 1 for me. Number 2, the number 2 deck, I'm going to put this here, and a lot of people will not agree with me. But I actually think that Karma Set is probably the second best deck in the format. It's a bit easier than the combo decks we've had in the past, but that doesn't mean that it still has a super high skill ceiling, but the skill floor is higher, right? If you come in without maybe as much knowledge or without as much practice, you will do better with this deck than you would with maybe the Zoe Lee decks of old or Karma Ezreal beforehand. Still very powerful, has a lot of really good matchups, and I think Karma Set is going to be a very common pick in tournament lineups. It's kind of difficult to counter, and has a lot of matchups that are very good, which we'll get into in a little bit. It also happens to be one of my favorite decks to play, and one of my preferred climbing decks at the moment. I think the win rate as of right now in Masters is actually under 50%, which is crazy to me, and I think over time it will go back up. So yeah, Karma Set PNZ specifically, not the other flavors. Karma Set PNZ, tier 1. Another deck that is absolutely performing at the highest caliber right now is Samira Leona, so a second Samira deck. This one a lot more aggressive, looking to take advantage of the aggressive Daybreak package. to really close out games. This deck existed beforehand, actually, last season, but it was Katarina instead of Samira. Other than that, not much has really changed. You attack a bunch. I think now they play Might, and they didn't before because they used to have Decimate. So now you run Might to like close games out. The deck is still super, super powerful. It's still putting up absolutely crazy numbers. I expect this to be a mainstay of ladder and tournament play as well, although it will be tough to see which one people gravitate to for tournaments because you cannot play Samira in your lineup twice. So that's currently like the top 3, I think, that I have for the best decks. And then creeping in, still in tier 1, some of them are not champions, and I'll explain why. I have the card Cataclysm. And what I mean by this is not the actual card Cataclysm is tier 1. What I mean is I think a Cataclysm deck will end up being tier 1. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be, because I think the flavor of the week kind of rotates around depending on what else happens to be good in the meta at that moment. So this could be anything. This could be a Jarvan Alawi deck. This could be a Vayne Aatrox deck, or this could be a Gwen Quinn deck. I expect one of those 3, or possibly multiple, or even all of those 3, to be a tier 1 deck, maybe a step below the other 3 in my opinion, but still very, very strong. Definitely deserving of the tier 1 spot, so keep an eye on them. After that, we move down to tier 1.5. These are decks that are very strong, but maybe have some significant weaknesses. Maybe they're not quite as good into the field, or maybe they're very, very good into a specific part of the field and not the rest. The first deck, tier 1.5, gotta be Ashe LeBlanc. This deck is putting up pretty crazy numbers right now. I think it is the winningest deck in Masters at the time of recording. After you filter out the decks that have like less than 1,000 games played. It's also pretty beginner friendly. There is a high skill ceiling, as with basically every single Legend of Runeterra deck, right? But if you don't know the ins and outs of the deck, you're not really going to get punished for it. It's still super, super powerful. A lot of people would probably argue that this deserves to be in tier 1, but it's the newest fluctuation in the metagame, and I expect things to change again. Ashe LeBlanc really spiked in power level once Sentry and Flock rotated out. The deck could never really compete with those PNZ Noxus style decks, and we're going to get to some of those in a second. But their worst predator has basically left, never to return in standard. So for now, Ashe LeBlanc kind of running wild. The big pumps like Omen Hawk, Revna, and Avaros and Hearthguard are very, very powerful in a format where the decks are trying to take advantage of Samira, right? Things like the Karma set looking to get there with things like Mystic Shot, High Note, and Caustic Rift. The Ashe deck pumps its units over those points and requires multiple spells to deal with their threats. Very rough. And then the inclusion of 3 copies of Reckoning, incredibly strong against decks that aren't able to remove the threats at a fast speed. Ashe LeBlanc may end up here, but for now, I'm going to put it at the very, very tippy top of tier 1.5. Another deck that I think is up there is the Tibble deck. This is the Annie Caitlyn deck that I've been preaching about. I'm a huge fan of this deck. I've been using it to climb a lot. I've been using it in Gauntlets. I think it's very, very good. People are playing really bad lists. You should be running High Note, and you should not be running Caitlyn's Piltover Peacemaker. That's the big switch. But the deck's very good. It does have some rough matchups. It suffers into some decks where they're like low enough to the ground where you need your small ball removal to work, but their units are big enough that it doesn't. And the main culprit of this is like the Samira Leona deck, and sometimes the Ashe LeBlanc deck, though I found that it's still quite favored for Annie Caitlyn. As long as you're very aware of the threat of Reckoning, you don't walk into Elixir of Iron too hard, and you don't needlessly run your units into really bad combat trades into their freezes and things like that. Annie Caitlyn, huge fan. Huge fan of this deck. Really love it. I'm sad that it's tier 1.5 instead of tier 1, but I just don't think it can compete with the big boys. Another deck I'm going to put up here at tier 1.5 is the Mischievous Mirai, representing the Seraphine Jack combo deck. This is a back alley bar deck. It plays Seraphine, it plays Jack, but most importantly, it plays Mischievous Mirai. And you sit there and you control the board a little bit. You land a Mischievous Mirai, or BB as we call her. You get a bunch of kegs on board and you point you point burn at your opponent's face, or you use a well-timed Caustic Rift to wipe your opponent's board. It plays kind of similarly to the Annie-Caitlyn deck, but a little bit more all in on the kegs and the Seraphine package. You don't have things like Disintegrate. You're incredible at killing small units. Really not good at killing big ones. Yeah, you have like a copy or two of Hexobliterator, and if you stick a Mischievous Mirai, you can do a lot of damage really easily. But if you don't have those things and your opponent plays like a 6/6, you're screwed. Like, you just can't stop it. And so for that reason, I am a little worried about the deck. It also has an inherent weakness to Karma Set. You basically need to OTK them with the Mischievous Mirai kegs. Otherwise, you have to 20-0 them almost with Warning Shot. Otherwise, if you give them a priority window, they'll just kill the keg and you're back at square one. If they get to turn 10, they get to do their combo thing, and it's going to be really, really difficult for you to pull off any sort of a victory here. I have a lot of decks after this. I think these are the top tier 1.5 decks in my opinion. So maybe I'll skip this zone right here and put things afterwards, starting with Darkness. Darkness is a deck that I expect to do better than it is. I'm keeping it at tier 1.5 because I have a lot of faith that we'll find a version that works out better. I think the Nora Vagar version was very, very good last season, but I think because of the bulk of the units that are being played right now and the loss of Vile Feast and Pokestick, I'm almost feeling like a more traditional Darkness, or maybe more of a hybrid with things like Senna and the 3/4 that makes your Darkness cheaper. I think that might be a better route to go, because against things like these Ash LeBlanc decks and all the Demacia decks running around, there are a lot of them. You need to be able to do more damage than just one. And just flooding the board with a bunch of dinkers that don't do anything is not going to win you the game anymore. So I think maybe pivoting towards a more Darkness-centric build of Darkness. I know that's funny. I think that might be the key. We'll see how this ends up doing at the Mastering Runeterra tournament on Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific. If you want to sign up, anyone's welcome to join. I expect this to show up. I don't expect it to do particularly well. I think control decks in general either have to have a very strong game plan that, oh my god, the word is escaping me. They need to be less reactive and more proactive. They have to have a very strong proactive game plan. That's what I'm looking for. In order to be strong in early metas, Karma Set has a very strong proactive game plan. All you need to do is don't die, and then you get to 10, and you basically win the game, right? Darkness, not quite there yet. It needs a little bit. It needs to know what it's up against. That way, it can build the best deck to combat it. So right now, near the bottom of tier 1.5. Another deck is Akshan Varus. Sorry, when I monologue, I forget to breathe and I yawn a lot. Akshan Varus, very strong tournament deck. Didn't lose much, honestly, with rotation, but the meta has changed. And with it, Akshan Varus has lost a little bit of its power. However, it's always been a much better tournament deck than it has been a ladder deck. And if control decks like Karma Set and other things end up being a larger part of the meta, then I would expect Akshan Varus to be a really powerful sleeper pick for these upcoming tournaments. Do not sleep on it. Bottom end of tier 1.5, gotta be Kayn Trox. The Vayne Aatrox deck is just much, much stronger in this current meta. Ash LeBlanc doo-doos on you. Karma Set doo-doos on you. There's a lot of decks that just doo-doo on you. It's just not good for you. I've also found that sometimes even the Demacia decks just kind of outpace you, and there's not much you can do about it, even though that shouldn't be happening. Things like Alawi can get out of hand really, really fast. So right now, if you want to play an Aatrox deck, I very much recommend the Vayne version, not the Kayn version. Not that the Kayn version can't come back and be very strong later. I think it is a very, very powerful deck. All the Darkening equipment, very strong. But now is not really the right time. Ash LeBlanc being like one of the most played, and Karma Set being, I think, maybe the most played deck in the format, it's not the right time for Kayn Aatrox. Let it sit for a while. Maybe it'll come back in a little bit. Let's move on now to tier 2. First one is Lurk. I'm going to be honest, I just think Lurk's a bad deck. I think it's sometimes high rolls you, and when it doesn't high roll you, it's incredibly easy to play around, as long as you don't walk into a Pike spell and like lose the game because of it, as long as you adequately play around Snapjaw Swarm. As long as you know what the Lurk player is capable of, it's a lot easier to just kind of deal with its threats. Also, you just instantly lose the game to a Karma Caustic Riff or a BB Caustic Riff, and there's not much you can do about it. So I just have this pretty low. A Flash Freeze deck being like one of the most played decks, and a Concussive Palm deck, like I just don't see Lurk putting up super solid performances. So right now, tier 2. Galio is representative of the big Demacia decks. This is going to be things like Galio Udyr and whatnot. Think ramping to 8, 9, and 10 Demacia decks, right? This is going to be your Tiana Crown Guards, your big Cythria, the 10 mana one. Very strong. If the Cataclysm decks end up becoming a much more larger part of the metagame, then you want to pivot to bigger Demacia to combat medium Demacia. But right now, I'm not a super huge fan of it. I found that the Ash LeBlanc deck can sometimes just run you over. This deck just doesn't care about anything you're doing, and this deck is absolutely going to blitz you, and it's going to be a problem for you. So right now, that's in tier 2. Swain strategies, I also think, are in tier 2. I thought the Alawi Swain deck was very, very cool. It was really good against Samira because it had a very nice mix of pressure and cheap removal. Samira is not being played as much anymore, although maybe we'll see Swain in tournament play. I just have to feel like there's better things. If you're really prepped on it, the Seraphine Jack deck can be very, very strong. The Annie Caitlyn deck, also very good against Samira Fizz. Requires a lot less reps, I believe, than the Seraphine Jack deck, where the Swain deck is just kind of good. It's just kind of good, but it is not as inherently strong, I believe, as the other list. And then, sadly, Deep, Mr. Nautilus. I'm going to put him also in tier 2. This is not in any particular order. With all of these decks, I feel like there's something better you can be doing, right? You want to play an attacking mid-range deck that's more aggressively slanted, you should be playing Samira Leona, right? Or even Ash LeBlanc. You want to be playing a Demacia strategy that looks to run over the board, then you should be playing one of the Cataclysm decks, right? You want to be playing small ball removal, you should be playing this, or this, or this. Even this, maybe, right? And then Deep is, well, it's there. It's actually not that bad. I just don't see it really winning you any tournaments. I don't know. It's there. It's Deep, man. What do you expect? It's not that bad. It's not that great either. Whatever. But yeah, that's the tier list. Again, it's mostly geared towards what like top of Masters and tournament play. That's really the only thing I care about. If you have any disagreements, let me know in the comments below. I'm sure lots of you do. I know I'm going to have my Darkness defenders out here being like, well, actually, it's tier 0. You just suck at Darkness, and maybe they're right. But no matter what you say in the comments, I'm not taking Lurk out of tier 2. So that's all I got for today. Thank you so much for coming. See you next time.